Hello, everybody. I'm Katie King, and I'm joined this afternoon by Love Hudson Maggio. We have the next 30 minutes to take you through a taster webinar called Mastering AI for a Well-Balanced Marketing Plan. So, Love, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Katie, and welcome everyone. My name is Love Hudson Maggio, and I am the CEO and co-founder of Mardat Consulting. We basically are a data management boutique firm, and we basically put the business into your marketing. It's great to be here today. I'm out of the United States in Atlanta, Georgia, and I work with Fortune 500 and 100 companies, helping them define their data and marketing strategies, as well as helping them with compliance for US and GDPR. And I'm excited to be here.
Thank you very much, Love. And so I'm Katie King, and I'm a published author and a marketing consultant with over 30 years experience. And my book was published in February of this year by Kogan Page, and it focuses on the impact of artificial intelligence and machine learning on marketing, but also other job functions such as sales and CX as well. So I'll be telling you a lot more about that as the webinar progresses. So we're going to switch off our webcams now, and we're going to share with you some slides to give you a flavor of some of the consultancy work we do, but also some of the paid workshops, face-to-face, bespoke sessions that we're offering our clients worldwide. So we'll be back with you at the end on webcam, but in the meantime, you'll be able to follow the slides and hear our voices. So thank you very much. Okay, so I'd like to start by really just giving you an overview of what AI actually is, and really just to set the scene. So you've heard a bit about me and you've heard a bit about Love, and you can read a bit more about that when you follow up with the slides afterwards. So let's start by really assessing, what do we mean by artificial intelligence? And really, how does it fit in with your world of marketing and business? So we're really talking here, and this is PwC, and it's their overview of really what AI is, which is a family of technologies performing tasks that would normally require human intelligence. And it covers a number of areas, from natural language processing to machine learning, but also speech recognition. So again, on our face-to-face bespoke courses and our more in-depth 90-minute course, we'll be taking you into a lot more detail with videos and breakout sessions on exactly how AI can be used. But what do we mean by AI in comparison to, say, machine learning? So AI, as I've mentioned, is that performance of a task that normally does require human intelligence. That might be planning, it might be understanding language. For example, when you post a picture on Facebook, it might say, why don't you tag your friend Love? Because it has that facial recognition, it has that AI built into it. Whereas with ML, machine learning, we're talking really about AI being used to achieve machine learning. And this ability to train a model to learn, you pump it in with lots of data, and it can therefore say to you, right, this is what makes a good story, this is what makes an award-winning film, and so on. And the more data you feed it, the better your output is going to actually be. So these technologies I'm describing are really business 4.0, or this new paradigm of marketing. And they're the new oil, the new electricity. We've had previous industrial revolutions of steam, electrification. At 52 years old, I'm old enough to have lived through the last 25 to 30 years of the era of computing. And what we're faced with now are these new technologies that are really, shifting the goalposts for a lot of people and reshaping a lot of the tasks that we actually do. So what do we really mean when we say AI, or artificial intelligence? I actually think it's the wrong term, and we should be using the word augmented intelligence. So fundamentally, we're talking about data. And the reasons people are so confused and worried about AI and machine learning is that we're still in this hype cycle. Gartner refers to a number of different stages, from that innovation trigger when scientifically or technically something becomes possible, And therefore, we've hit that peak of inflated expectation where the media don't yet have loads of case studies of successes to actually report on. And so they revert to Hollywood, to HAL, to Terminator. And that's where we're at the moment. And actually, we've probably dipped into the next phase, which is the trough of disillusionment. And in my book, I feature quite a lot of case studies of failures where companies have made mistakes. And we're not yet at the scope of enlightenment, and we're certainly not at that plateau of productivity. So again, in the face-to-face and the online in-depth courses, we'll be able to share a lot more detail with you on that. So we like to constantly keep up to speed and share with you the latest insights and trends. So here are a few statistics from a recent report in the Sunday Times here in the UK. And this is really looking at actually US research that says, what do business leaders and IT executives find as the top benefit when they're looking at AI? Number one, enhancing current products, optimizing internal ops, and making better decisions. And there's a number of others below that actually are pretty close in percentage terms. So gives you a feel for exactly how it's being used. In terms of industry sectors, telecoms here, look across the top axis and you're seeing that in telecoms, one of the biggest uses of AI is for service operations. Whereas if you drop down the list there to the third from the bottom, in travel, one of the biggest uses again is service operations. But if you jump up to automotive, manufacturing is one of the key reasons that they're using it for. And if you look at marketing across the top there, you're seeing, for example, retail towards the bottom in the marketing row being one of the biggest users of AI for marketing, which my case studies in my book bear out as well. So I'm going to hand over to Love now, who'll talk to you a bit more about the data side.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Katie. So one of the things that Katie mentioned was the importance of when you're thinking about AI and integrating that into your marketing plan, it's important to understand the data. And, our mantra is good data in, good data out. So at the end of the day, you really have to consider the data because all of augmented intelligence is around the data. So when I think about the data that you're using, it falls into three buckets. That would be maintenance, governance, and execution. And all of those items build to the business value, which we'll talk about a little bit today. So a few of the considerations for maintenance would be things around the ingestion of your data, like your records, your data set. You want to make sure that your data has that level of quality. So there's a whole quality management component to it, and thinking about how you're going to use that data in profiling. Are you going to put it in the DMP? Are you going to use a CDP? Are you going to use a CRM for email, etc.? And having some type of process where you're continuously cleaning and improving that data. It can't be, a one and done scenario. And then consent management. In these days and times of data privacy, it is crucial to have your consent management platforms and procedures in place. And then I always talk about data synchronization. A lot of companies have different time zones and they're operating globally. And it's important that your data is syncing and what is your element of truth, and having security and archiving available to protect your data as well. So that's all a part of maintenance. When you start talking about execution, you're talking about how you're actually going to use that data and looking at the different dynamic needs of your organization. IT has a different need than marketing, and they can't be siloed. So thinking about how you're actually going to create those data process and procedures, those roadmaps, the architecture, the tools you're going to use, and syncing that across your organization. So it's a holistic plan on how you're going to execute your AI toolkit. In addition to that, I always talk to my clients around making sure that they've commercialized that support through all their silos, and that they've answered those data concerns, and that they have a unified taxonomy and data dictionary, and they're all basically singing from the same sheet of music. Also, you have to really be thinking about what you're doing around your business and your reporting, and you may have several different analytics platforms, and those all have to be considered when you're thinking about your AI capabilities. The last piece would be governance. And in the governance area, you're really thinking about leadership, and you're having your C-suite and your executives and your managers think about data and that data strategy and how they're going to manage that, and looking at the real business value and putting some ROI behind that. They're also going to be thinking about the people, because people are the core of everything you're doing, and we'll talk a bit about that a bit more later in the slides. We're going to be thinking about, handling that data. It's your, your first, your 1P is your gold mine. And then also aligning all of your business imperatives and making sure you standardize that data, and that you guys all know what the data means and how it's defined, and then using that across your different stakeholders. All that is fundamentally important. Next slide gets into a bit more of the KPIs. I feel like at the end of the day, everybody wants to know the business value, and why do I care about this? Why will I take the time to do all of this? And so the next few slides, we're going to go through what the actual KPIs are. So in data governance, we have several key business drivers, and they fall in the area of align, standardize, and control. So when we think about aligning, we're thinking about that business strategy, we're thinking about that roadmap, we're thinking about those regulatory requirements, be them data or security, whatever those things are. And we're also considering our sponsors. We're thinking about communications with them and having them understand the business value, and knowing that that business value can change depending on what part of the company is engaged. IT may have a different focus than marketing, and sometimes that business value is going to be the same, sometimes it's not. Standardizing things when you're thinking about the actual business rules. You're putting those business rules together, because at the end of the day, everything needs to be repeatable. It needs to be somewhat of a rinse and repeat. And establishing those business rules and methodologies early is very, very helpful. Also, the hierarchy of those standards and making sure that your metadata and those definitions are exactly what you want them to be. You may want to partner with other companies and maybe share some metadata across your platform. So it's important for you to know those definitions, so that if you are trying to explore opportunities, say, for example, in your DMP, you want to partner up with someone or share data, you want to basically understand what those overlaps. And if you have your definitions defined, then you can better see how you're scoring with your partners. And then lastly would be around controls. That gets into all of your framework, your governance, how you're managing your data and your technology, who's actually the business owner, and that can shift and change if you're working with agency partners or vendors based on their part of the execution. Maybe things would change, but at the end of the day, there's going to be a core owner who sets those rules. You're going to be thinking about process and procedures, privacy and GDPR considerations. And then also, I feel like it's important for you to be thinking about cybersecurity. If there is a breach or a hack, or if you see some suspicious things going on within your data set, it's important to have an incident response plan in place, at least consideration, so you'll know, who do I need to contact, who needs to explore this a little bit more. No one wants to be caught unaware. I think there was a really good and recent example of Capital One's breach this week, and the fact that they had to find out from an external force through an external email, that they had been, their data had been breached. Nobody wants to find out secondhand. You want to be able to see suspicious behavior and make corrections quickly. So next, we're talking about data execution and some of those key drivers there, and that would be around design, build, and commercialization. So when we think about the KPIs around data execution, we're talking about our marketing stack, really looking at that marketing stack, evaluating those vendors, establishing baseline metrics, looking at that data architect, how they connect together, those process and procedures, and making sure that those integrations have secure points, and that basically that the technology partners are really singing from the same sheet of music. And then when you go and you build out your campaigns, be it for branding or evergreen, you want to make sure that there's some synchronicity there as well. And one of my favorite parts is around audience curation, really going in and refining and defining those audiences that you want to reach within your campaign. Also thinking about those share points. And then the last area would be in commercializing that, right? Looking at your analytics and your AI and establishing some baseline KPIs there, looking at reporting through your different vendors, and maybe you have your own homegrown. And then you have to really start thinking about change management. One of the things that's happening a lot in the industry is companies are having to rethink how they handle, store, use data, and communicate how to use. And so that's a whole change management process. That's a new way of thinking. That's a new education across your divisions on, hey guys, here's the new way of doing things. And then we think about data extraction, any kind of transformational steps you're doing, and any kind of new technology tools. And then the last piece would be around data maintenance. And so when you think about data maintenance, you're thinking about how to maintain, how to block things you want to block, remove things you want, data sets that are no longer relevant. And every organization, especially in marketing, you have rules of engagement of how long you want to keep a data set, what data you want to onboard, what you want to retain and what you want to remove. Also, it's all around quality. I talked about that earlier. It's important to be looking at how to protect and how to classify that data. Maybe it's a vertical focus, maybe it's not. And then ensuring that you have the right security profile and maintenance. I mean, not everybody should be touching all the data all the time, and making sure there's some type of audit trail to kind of understand, where the different changes have taken place in your organization. And then we get into sharing. We're talking about that offline and that online subscription. Maybe you have something that's coming through the mail. Maybe you have something that's online subscription, that newsletters or things like that, or email. And you want to make sure things are synchronized across those data sets, and that you know what actually gave you the most bang for your buck for your campaign, so you can move quickly and have a repeatable process. And then, of course, you got to make sure you secure and cleanse that data and archive it. So those are the three components of data management maintenance.
Love, that was fantastic. Thank you very much. I'm going to jump back in now. Love talk there a bit about the change management and the commercialization. And that's exactly what we focus in on our consultancy and in our training. And what I'm able to do briefly here, I'll mention it, but in depth in our actual work with you, is to give you insights to job functions, industry sectors all over the world, examples of brands such as Royal Bank of Scotland and Ocado, fashion brands, and so on. And there's a couple of quotes here from, for example, the head of AI at the Royal Bank of Scotland. And what he's talking about here is how banks have typically been criticized for not knowing the customer. And with machine learning and AI tools, you can get deeply into much better, much broader, sorry, not much broader, but much more in-depth segments of your customers, rather than saying, somebody of 40 to 55, female. We can actually say, this is her name. She comes into our store at this time on a Thursday night. She orders this, and so on, and really get a feel for what that person is like, what their preferences are, and giving them a much, much more personalized service. So AI, as I mentioned earlier, is giving us that augmented intelligence and that ability to make our marketing very, very personalized. If we look across sectors as diverse as construction, to law, to accountancy, to medicine, we're seeing massive potential for all kinds of job functions being radically changed and shifted as a result of the kind of analytics and information that we're able to do. So in my book, I feature some of these brands, and I'll be sharing them alongside Love with you during the in-depth training. Banks like Saxo Bank, which is a Danish bank, which actually deployed AI quite early and made a number of mistakes. So, they were able to learn from those mistakes. I've got a couple of slides coming up on that in a few moments. But, we've got here an example of a retailer. So this is the organization, the fashion brand called Reese, and they use a tool, an AI tool called Increasingly, and that tool bundles products together in a similar way to the way Amazon do it on their website. And it's saying you bought this pair of trousers, perhaps you'd be interested in this shirt to go with it. And it's looking at predictive analytics of understanding what is it that people buy and fitting them into quite kind of detailed customer segments. So what I want to do now is to give you a bit of an example of, knowing all of this, knowing what these case studies are and how people are starting to use it, how can you actually prepare? So we'll take you through in much more depth in the training or in the consultancy workshops around this scorecard for success, which I used in my book, which was the distillation of a year of in-depth research with numerous brands and loads of tech disruptors, many, many different academics and policymakers. So I'll just pick off a few examples. So mindset. So it's really important to, have the right mindset for a technology such as AI, to have a vision, to know that it's inevitable and that you need to change, and to therefore be very flexible and realistic about what you're trying to achieve. If we think of number 8, innovation, then actually you've got this brand I mentioned, which is Saxo Bank, who actually failed. They failed with AI the first time around. And just recently, in the last couple of months, they've had some real successes, and they've been able to get the onboarding of their customers down to a really tight time frame because they're using AI. But going back a couple of years, the AI chatbots which they actually used were found by clients to be very gimmicky, and staff were threatened by them. So they've been agile enough and they've been innovative enough, number 8 and number 4, and they've had experimentation and proofs of concept, and they've been able to iterate, and they've been able to come up with a number of successes. During the training, we'll share with you in much more depth about culture. We'll talk to you about the wider impact, for example, the ethics and the transparency, and Love mentioned them just briefly there, GDPR and compliance. It's really, really important. And knowing the wider impact that AI is going to have on jobs, on communities, on families, and how we need to collaborate as scientists, as business people, as educators, and that's really important too. So I think you'll find this particular aspect of the training really, really insightful, and we'll go into that in a lot more depth. We'll be sharing with you examples of who some of the big vendors are, the Adobe Sensei, Amazon Web Services, and IBM Watson's, but also loads of the different technology disruptors that you can turn to. And here's a chart that explains, who some of them are in marketing alone, and it's broken down into paid media or social media or chatbots. So we'll give you more examples of that. We've tried and tested a number of these, and we'll be able to share, that with you in much more depth. So I'm going to hand back to Love now for the final section of this taster webinar.
Thank you so much, Katie. So we're going to talk a little bit about audience alignment and customer journey. So when we think about those components, we are considering the people, the process, the data, and the technology. They're all part of audience alignment and that customer journey. So when we talk about audience alignment, we're thinking of data as we start. And it's, what is the data? How does that particular piece of data get used in the business? What is the right data? How are you onboarding that data? Considering the actual data that you have, is it 1P? Is it your O&O? Is it third party? Is it second party? These things are all very, very important to know. And the data, if it doesn't have a fundamental use or you're unsure of the use, you should not add it in. Because when you start thinking about AI and planning for it, you want to make sure that every element of the data set that's being used is holding its own weight. So it's very important to be considering that. Then we start thinking about the technology. And when we get into that, we're thinking about the systems landscape. You know, what are you using? Is this a CDP or a DMP, a CRM, et cetera? And what technology partners are I going to be working with? What's my essential source of truth? Is it CRM or is it my DMP? It's important for you to know that and have everyone in the organization agree, and then be thinking about those tools as well. And then we start talking about people. We're actually thinking about the people that we are trying to go after with our campaigns. Who are we trying to help, and what exactly, what services are we providing them, and what's that audience demo? What's their intent, behavior? What type of messaging really gets them moving? And what type of behavior? How are they behaving across the platforms? You know, how are they engaging with those particular platforms? What are those site behaviors? And you would have some of those resources already, but to really be thinking about that, because as AI powers that, you want to get better and better at that. At the end of the day, it's that call to action, and you want to make it be a seamless experience. You don't want the customer all over the page trying to figure out how to engage. And then you want to think about your customers. Are they brand loyalists or are they occasional shoppers? What's the time frame for purchasing? If you're purchasing tires or a boat, you're not going to buy that every year. But if you're buying clothing, you may buy something on a seasonal basis, or if you have toddlers, we're going to probably buy shoes a couple times a year. So understanding whether they're loyal to your brand, how they interact with other brands, how are you measuring that? Is it based on email opens, or if they click, or if they download a coupon, or if they search for a location, a store location, or if they subscribe to your newsletter, or if they're part of your loyalty membership and they're getting membership points. And then the final piece would be around process. You know, what are the key attributes that you're going to use in order to build those segments? Have you defined those clearly? Are you going to be using your 1P, or are you going to be using 3P, and what are some of the considerations around data and consent, and what are some of those overlapping traits that you hope to see within those segments? And if you're actually doing any kind of testing around that or split segments, there's also things to consider there. So that's really, when we get into audience alignment, those are the key pieces. So the next piece we're going to talk about is customer journey. At the end of the day, we want to make sure that our customers are happy and they have coming to your platform is seamless. And in doing that, we want to find the customers. We want the right customers who want our product. We want to be able to solve that problem. What problem are we actually solving? We want to connect with that customer and really listen. We're going to talk a lot more in our longer session around that, not just social listening, but understanding the way the customer is engaging with us, just listening to them and understanding what products they want and when they want them. And then, of course, we want to close the deal. We want to keep these customers. We want them to be happy. We want them to feel fulfilled in the products that they are purchasing or consider purchasing with us. And then, of course, we want to report, refine, and we want to repeat that success. So as we've been talking today around this AI prep, it's fundamentally important when we are considering integrating AI into our marketing that we look at data, people, technology, and process, and we ask ourselves a few fundamental questions. What exactly are we trying to do for that customer? What problem are we actually solving for them? Why did they even show up, at our storefront or online? And what data, will be your key business drivers? What are your KPIs? What data sets do you plan to use? Which ones do you plan to port into AI? So you want to know this so that you can have some idea of what you expect AI to do for you. And how does the business use this data? The way IT uses data is probably going to be very different than the way your marketing uses it. So you just really want to kind of know that and have those internal communications. I'm sure you're going to have some type of steering committee. You guys are going to be communicating this out and sharing with the different cross-functional groups the success and challenges. And then, of course, in this day and age of data privacy, we have to be thinking about how long we're going to use this data and in what systems are we going to integrate if we have any situations where a customer asks to uphold their rights of portability or right to be forgotten. We want to be able to locate those data assets that we may be using in our AI system or across other data platforms and be able to quickly address those concerns via SDK or API, whatever method you're using. And what data outputs do you expect from AI? I kind of talked about that a second ago, thinking about those data sets. What do you want your AI to do for you? What exactly are you hoping to get? I mean, you obviously had some key objectives when you took the time to purchase your AI tool or integrate with the AI tool or test the AI tool. So thinking about what you hope they do for you. If you're an insurance company and you already understand, you know, the demographic and the behavior of someone who's going to buy car insurance, then, you know, maybe you're hoping your AI tool is going to help with some of those predictors on that same customer's ability to be upsold on homeowners insurance or renters insurance or boat insurance or rental home insurance or something like that. So if there's some key behaviors that are overlapping, it'd be great to know that. And then you can know if that will be a customer that you can also approach about some of your other products or refining the products that they currently have if you're thinking about making some changes. So that's it for me.
That was
Thanks so
brilliant,
much.
love. That was absolutely
Thank you.
excellent. Thank you very much. So hopefully that's given you a really good flavor of what Love and I can offer you. We'll be putting up on screen shortly some of the dates coming up for our online training. You'll be able to purchase a copy of the recorded 90-minute webinar, but also we'd love you to join us on one of our live 90-minute webinars and some of our face-to-face courses, which will be running all over the world over the coming months. So thank you very much for joining us, and we'll tune into you again soon. Thank you and take care. Bye-bye.